Well, I'm here with Pete Gosling, are you the project manager for the new K47?
So I'm head of product and marketing of Warlord games, which means that Konflikt 47 is one of the projects that I lead.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing this now? It's been a while, right?
I've been at Warlord for 4 years, and we bought Konflikt 47 from Clockwork Goblin about 3 years ago. So we've kind of been working on that as a project, and I took over more responsibility in the studio when Paul went off ill, and assumed full responsibility once we knew Paul wasn't able to come back to work.
And it's kind of familiar, but you've made some fairly sweeping changes in places for the background and things like that. What was the process for developing from what it was to what it is now?
So a lot about Konflikt is about creating a world where we can tell really good stories, and make sure that we had the freedom to do that. So we've had to go back, we changed some of the sort of the more historical parts, and that just gives us a lot more freedom to write in new things and write in new narratives and story arcs and develop new characters and do those sorts of things. So what we did is we went back and we had a really good look about what we wanted to tell and what that story was. And Konflikt 47 is very much about talk about the man meeting God, but not God, you know, the rift, and it gives you these extra powers and extra knowledge and extra information, and that allows people to go through and create new weapons and do new things. So, you know, power corrupts and all of that sort of stuff. So, and it's very much a story about humanity versus humanity, and when there becomes a sort of an arms race, as it became because of all the new weapons, everything like that, it became, you know, who will survive, and that's kind of how we ended up. You know, this is not war, this is the end. It's, you know, it's really bad. Everyone's vying for survival. So, and then we looked at that and thought, well, if that's the overall story arc and it is very much about humanity versus humanity, how do we create a world that allows us to create great stories within that? And that's largely how we went around. There's loads more detail and loads more meetings and all that sort of stuff about that, but you know, broadly that was the principle about what we're doing and why we're doing those things.
Yeah, is that partly why you've got kind of the split in scenarios in the book now, that you've got your more battle-based ones and then also the story scenarios as well to enhance that?
Yeah, some of that comes through from bolt action, but very much is about being able to tell stories and using those scenarios to create narrative campaigns. So our plans going forward are very much about stories and supplements that way, rather than sort of armies of books like you'd see in something like bolt action. So it's very much about developing that world and creating a really great background for people to play games in, and ultimately the freedom to then go and create their own stories within that as well. So, and you know, and that goes back to what we're saying about creating a universe where people can go and do those things that they want to do, and they can be creative how they want to be creative. So they're really important things for us, and that's very, very different to what Warlord does. You know, we're a historical miniatures business for the vast majority of what we do, and we allow people to play games and refight those things that have happened throughout history. So Konflikt just gives us a completely different angle on that.
Yeah, but I mean, and at the same time, there are those historical ties. Obviously, you're corrupting them and messing with them a bit, but and there's the connection to the bolt action rules, which was 3rd edition already very present whilst you started the design of these new rules, and you've kind of brought that in to this version of Konflikt 47. Yeah,
we would have, had we not been working on 3rd edition, we would have seen Konflikt earlier.
Right.
So what we wanted to do was make sure that we'd got bolt action 3rd edition out of the way. We worked with Osprey on that, so we've got a schedule to deliver to, and then making sure that we chose the most appropriate point in our release calendar to then launch Konflikt 47. So, but very much it's based on the rules of that. So anybody that's played bolt action, there's loads will be familiar, but there's some key parts of Konflikt that make it very, very different. And that was another design principle that we really focused on, was if we've got this really cool intellectual property, how do you weave that into the game? And that has to become an absolutely integral part of the gameplay experience. So you take bolt action and you say, well, I've got to weave all these things in, and that's how we ended up with the rift mechanic and the heroes mechanic and those sorts of bits as well. So it's it's been a long journey of make sure those things work together. So visually, there'll be lots of bits that feel familiar. You should kind of identify it as the 40s as a period of arrested development. You know, there's not a lot of The design and philosophies and all those sorts of things that came afterwards, you won't necessarily see that in there, but what we're trying to do, and this is a really difficult part of it, is you're asking somebody who, a miniatures designer, say, I need you to sit down, I need you to think about what a military engineer would be thinking about to design a walking tank or a walking mech, or those bits, and how do you visually tie all those things together. The second you put legs on something, it looks massively sci-fi. So how do you keep it looking like it was developed in the 40s, but still having that freedom to go off and create these amazing designs and do that sort of stuff. So I think it's been a real challenge for us all, and a massive learning point for the whole team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels a lot more cohesive than the previous version of the game, and with the rift mechanics coming in, I played a demo game, and they feel like they're the really unique kind of selling point of the game now, and also maybe have kind of led a bit more of the design of the different factions and stuff as well. When did that come in the process? Was that something that kind of landed early on, or did that happen quite organically?
So I in terms of the mechanics, we're briefed out right at the beginning. It's like, if we're going to go and do this, it's really important. And we came up with a phrase quite quickly. It's heroes, horrors, monsters and mechs, and those bits. And we said that heroes are going to be massively important, so there needs to be a mechanic that allows heroes to influence things. Horrors is very much about what I talked about. It's the humanity versus humanity doing horrible things to each other. When you read about the background and some of the things we talk about, there's some real horrible things that go off. And visually, when you look at the photography, it's a lot more destruction. It's kind of described as the camera panning around from the initial version, which is the sort of blue skies, green grass, and it kind of pans around to that more sort of like Dresden in the background, and that level of horror that we unleash on each other when things are really desperate or difficult. Monsters is all about the weird stuff that scientists are going to do to humanity, turning them into Nakjig and Naktalbum, and these things will look like werewolves, or they might look like demons, or they might look like vampires, but they're very much human experiments brought through by the Rift. And mechs are just obviously cool. Mechs are mechs.
Gotta have some
we know what mechs are, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's those things that you go, look, they're really important, and those things have to exist in the game. And the Rift mechanic itself allows you to keep track of how those units work. So if it's a Rift unit, it'll have a Rift dice, and that means that it'll have certain abilities, but it can only use them if that Rift is active. So, it just acknowledges that Rift energy isn't quite as stable. It's still an experimental thing. It's still quite early in its being used. But also, you might be able to overpower your weapon and shoot more than you would do, but it might hurt you and all those sorts of things as well. So, yeah, they were real sort of grounding philosophies that we wanted to start off with, which is what a lot of the playtesting was about. So we know the order mechanic work, we know pinning works, all those sorts of things we've taken from Bolt Action. So a lot of the focus was about making sure that all of those unit special rules that give them the abilities and those things all tied in nicely together.
Yeah, and it does seem like that's probably where the story's going to come, as you were saying. That's important to you because you've also got there's more characters here, and there are kind of named characters, but then also the opportunity for people to kind of create their own stories with characters that have developed through campaigns and stuff.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, I mean, you mentioned playtesting. How do you balance and continue to balance a game like this as you add all these extras in?
The bit where we focused mainly was getting the core rules right, so making sure that Rift mechanic overall worked. So when does a dice become exhausted? Once it's exhausted, what do you do with it? How do you get that back, and how do those things flow through, and the special rules, things like that. So once we've got the kind of the core mechanics of the game sorted, we knew that actually that's really solid and that's a good foundation. The bit that plugs into that then is the army lists, and that's where you suddenly end up with so many more permutations of all the different things that can happen. And one of the scenarios we ended up with was like 2 close combat units. Their special rules meant that actually you ended up with a close combat that was 26 rounds long, and it didn't really resolve. And you're like, that's just not fun for anybody to play. So, clearly that needs a lot of work. And because we're going to tell these stories, and this is where it all links together, is we've got all these stories we want to tell. If we want to introduce new units and do different things as we go through all of these stories, then we need a really effective way of being able to make sure that gamers have exactly the right army list and things like that. So when we looked at that and we talked about our experiences, and one of the clear sort of less pleasurable experiences is having a book an army list, 2 erratas, an FAQ, and all of those bits as you go through, and you're trying to pull them all together. I mean, I've got a copy of Realm of Chaos back from the 80s, and it's got bits we were stuck in where we printed it out to make sure the book's right. But that was a very, very different time. So we have an opportunity here to say, well, actually, what if we just did PDF army lists? And we just make sure that it's always the latest version.
Yeah.
So if in 2 months' time we want to release a new unit or a new character or do something because we've written a really great story, and that's good for Konflikt and good for our customers, we'll say, well, we can do that, and we'll just release the new version of the PDF. Yeah. So all you do is you go, well, when that comes out, I'll just download the latest version of the PDF. And that allows us to do things like maybe do some points balancing. We might have to reword a special rule ever so slightly just to make sure it's clear, because there's a finite amount of time and a finite amount of people that you can get to play test. And when you think about it, by the time we get out to like 10,000 more people who are going to play 10 games each, there's going to be a lot more sort of feedback that we're going to be able to get from the community as well. And that allows us to be responsive in an effective way with the gaming community and kind of work with people a little bit more and be certainly open to that. So I think that having those PDF army lists is going to be massive for us as well.
And it does feel like, whilst it's going to be a great game for people who want to tell stories, from what I've played of it, it does feel like there could be quite an interesting meta when it comes to competitive gaming, especially with the rift mechanics and some of the extra stuff. So the ability to bring that balance in when someone breaks it horribly in a tournament game or something is probably quite wise as well.
No, absolutely. So competitive play is a really important part for us as well. When I go back to the office this afternoon, we've got a meeting about what we're going to be doing at some shows next year, and competitive play and organised play is a key part of that discussion. So I think there's been some really interesting developments in competitive play and how those things are controlled. And I think what we want to do is we'll talk about what experience do we want competitive players to have, and then how do we go and create an environment that allows that to happen. So I'd certainly like to be at one of the big shows next year. So I know UK Games Expo or Adepticon or Gen Con, and we're running a bigger tournament, and we've got all of those things going off. So yeah, big ambitions for competitive play, but they're the people who are going to find them. They're going to find the little meta, the little bit that we've missed. They're going to exploit that with an inch of its life, and we'll have to decide whether it's right or wrong to change that or not. But you're spot on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, with the new game, you've got an amazing selection of like new plastics coming out and modifications to some of your other vehicles as well. Kind of, what's the plan going ahead with that beyond what we've already seen, and what can you tell us now about other nations coming up?
So there's more stuff we want to do than we can physically do. So I spend a lot of my time trying to work out what order we do things in, and making sure that all is going to be exciting for customers and we do things at the right time. So we've got more nations miniatures coming out. So obviously we started off with the US and the Axis, and then we've got the Empire of Japan, we've got the British Commonwealth, and we've also got the Soviet Union. The Soviet bloc, and we've got a whole range of miniatures for those as well. So I see a lot on Facebook and people commenting, it's like, oh, no new miniatures for this. Like, honestly, just wait. We've got so many cool things to show you. We've got more ideas, and what keeps happening is we say, let's transform this kit, and we'll do a plastic version of that. And we get so far down the design, and typically it's John who will say to me, he says, well, should we just make this a new kit? Because actually it's just so far from that now, and these are all really good ideas. We look at those and I think that's what we're going to do. And some of these things happen organically as well. So you have a really, really tight plan about what you're going to do, and then you start the design process and you end up a bit further off than where you thought you would be. And you have a product that's going to stand on its own. And you think, well, actually now we're going to have to go back and write some rules for that. And guess what? We've got PDF army lists, so we can do that, and it becomes, becomes really flexible for us, but also flexible for customers as well. So, loads of plastics, as much plastics as we can get out. Plastics take a lot longer to do, just from a design, splitting all the parts, doing all those sorts of things. Also costs more money, but we'll do as many plastics as possible. We're big fans of plastic miniatures. We'll keep them as simple to build as possible. We'll do certain kits, so people who've seen the linebacker kit, that's 3 frames, plus a little cool crystal canopy that sits inside the other part of the plastic, so you don't have to mask it off and paint it, and all those little things that the designers are doing. But that's a real centerpiece. So there's lots of parts in that kit, so people can do loads of customizability. But actually, the style trip in it is legs, body, arms, and you know, you're pretty much there. So just getting those things balanced. But yeah, we've got loads of new plastics for all the nations. We've got loads of new Warlord resin miniatures for all the nations. Some of them will be new kits, some will be replacements or alternative sculpts to things that already exist as well. But for as long as possible, we want to keep the existing range there. And you know, we've said that all of those things will have a unit entry. It might not be exactly the same thing as it was, but everybody's collections will be usable. So we'll keep as many of those kits going as long as possible while it's feasible and while it's the right thing to do. But yeah, loads of new stuff.
Cool. So as you've developed this, I guess, any particular favourites from all this new stuff that's come about, and any kind of real, I didn't expect that to happen kind of experiences through the development of the game where something's taken you by surprise?
Yes, absolutely. Literally every other day when I see the next thing, I get massively excited about it. It's like proper kid at Christmas. You know, I remember like you opening that present and that present was the best thing ever. Then you open the next present and you're just even more amazed. So, you know, it's incredibly hard work doing all of this sort of stuff, but the fantastic side is I get to look at toy soldiers all day and people bring me stuff and it's great. So, and you know, without giving too much away, worrying about whether a bear's ears are too cuddly or not, and how do we make them look angry, and you know, if they're these big hulking ursas, and you know, how do you make them look mean? And one of the designers was laughing at me the other day because I just sent him a random photo of a bear growling and like late at night. So I'm like, no, that's kind of what I'm getting at. But I didn't put a message with it. It's like, you know, just random things that go through. But I kind of use that to illustrate how engaged everybody is with the project. You know, we kind of message each other after hours a little bit. We shouldn't do. It's, you know, it's work. There's work hours, and but there's a bit of an understanding sometimes when there's those little niggles we've been talking about, and we'll share some stuff later on in the day. But it's so the Empire of Japan stuff that just blew me away. Just seeing all of those designs and just watching all of that come together. And then we've done some of the Soviet stuff. But one of the big things that massively helped us actually was working with the artist Steph Kapinski. So he's done all the vignettes and he did the cover. And I would urge anybody who hasn't really stopped and looked at that cover yet is to really engage with it. There's so many tiny little stories going off, right from the background of the fireflies jumping up, the linebacker dropping into the back of the Vogelspinner, and some of the you know, the Stahltrupp and staring straight at you as the user and everything. There's all these little stories going off, and why does the flame on the flamethrower change colour as it goes into the room, and all those sorts of things. So, you know, go and engage with that. He's done an absolutely magnificent job. But Steph, he came up for a quick meeting. I think it was like 3 hours later. We were still talking and still generating ideas. He's been a fantastic person to work with, and he's really helped invigorate the designers. And he's done some artwork that was then informed the miniatures design, and then the miniature designs then moved on. And it's been such a fantastic, creative, collaborative project. You know, I just get excited about everything, and I'm just going to have to do every army.
You're just going to have to be careful when those living rule books keep going on, that you're not just constantly putting more and more effort into it.
Absolutely. Well, and that's probably the flip side, is that with that freedom, we're going to have to be really careful, because actually if you do too many changes too often, I think that will frustrate people as well. It's constantly changing everything. So, but just going back to the point about is not invalidating things that people have got. So we will do updates, but we'll be very, very cautious about suddenly not. You know, we're not going to massively downgrade somebody's collection just because we've got a new thing coming out. We may have to really balance stuff, but it's always going to be about game balance and making sure those things work. And we've tried to put in a little bit of headroom for us with certain things into the future. We've got some ideas for 2 or 3, 4 years' time, but yeah, it's going to be a fine balance. But yeah.
I'm tempted to ask you about those things, but I won't, because I'm sure you can't tell me yet. But,
there's nothing firm enough to really say. They're very broad bits, but yeah.
Is there anything else you feel I haven't asked you that it would be really important that people know about?
I think just make sure that you're keeping an eye out on the Konflikt47.com and the community site. We've got loads of stories, loads of short stories. We've got loads of lore, loads of background, loads of battle reports, loads of really cool stuff about how the game works and everything coming. and yeah, just get in touch. If there's stuff you've got questions, join the Facebook group and just get involved. But the bit I really want people to walk away knowing is it looks like a historical war game from one angle, but actually it's hugely creative. Go and paint your miniatures whatever colour you want. Give your tanks names, give your walkers names, make up the commander. So heroes are important, so every platoon commander is going to be able to have points of grit, rift mastery or luck, and they'll be able to go off and do certain things as a part of that. So give them a name, write a little backstory and share that with people. So yeah, it's not about refighting historical battles, and we'll tell you what the history is and go back and refight all of those things, but go off and do all of those other things. So yeah, it's just going to have fun with your miniatures, and we'll do our best as a business to support that. So.